Coming up, a new report highlights the challenges for performance-based Native artists, and the Muskogee Creek Nation beefs up its meat processing plants. Plus, we'll hear more about the NDN Collective's class action lawsuit against a hotel seeking to ban Native Americans. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is a proud supporter of Indian Country Today. Students at Cronkite News and Gaylord College at the University of Oklahoma cover Indigenous communities together. This important work is distributed by more than 100 news organizations. This collaboration provides a much-needed boost to coverage of Native American communities nationwide. Learn more at cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amadawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start in Washington, D.C., where the Interior Department is announcing a major investment to combat climate change in Indigenous communities. On Monday, the agency announced it will fund $46 million to projects that address climate resilience and adaptation. The funding is important because tribal nations are already reporting climate-related challenges. Some of the projects that have been funded include ocean and coastal management, internships, and youth engagement. In a statement, Secretary Deb Haaland said in part, "As the effects of climate change continue to intensify, Indigenous communities are facing unique climate-related challenges that pose existential threats to tribal economies, infrastructure, lives, and livelihoods." Haaland said coastal communities are facing flooding, melting permafrost, and sea level rise. Inland communities are facing terrible droughts and extreme heat. The funding has been made through President Joe Biden's infrastructure law. And for those interested in learning more, a webinar will be hosted on April 25th. It is virtual and will address how tribal nations can apply for funding opportunities. In the capital city of Brazil, thousands of Indigenous citizens made their voices heard last week. They are demanding better control and protection for their lands. Indigenous leaders say Bolivian President Jair Bolsonaro has failed to control illegal mining and deforestation on Indigenous reserves.
Mostrar para toda a população.
We are here to show to the world that we are against mining on Indigenous land, against the violence and all sorts of violation of our rights, and to show what this president is doing, because what he is doing is genocidal.
This is leading to violent clashes between land invaders and local tribal groups. Advocates also called for more Indigenous representatives in its parliament. There are currently no Indigenous elected officials. The march is part of the 18th annual Freeland Indigenous Camp. On the homelands of the Akwesasne in New York, marijuana sales are flourishing. This comes as the state of New York could begin selling marijuana products by the end of the year. So far, the St. Regis Mohawk Nation is among other tribal nations who are capitalizing on the sales ahead of time. Early projections show the market is expected to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. William Roger Jock owns Goodleaf. He says these sales are a way to express tribal sovereignty.
Our visitors, our friends, our families, everything, this is a relief for them. So to get back to I'm ahead of the game, well, we have been stepped on. We have been stepped on for so long. And to have something like this happen, it's almost liberating.
Other Indigenous cannabis store owners like Ryan White, CEO of Butter's Cannabis Store, say it's another way to give back.
A lot of our money comes from the casino and from cigarettes and gases from non-natives. And so that's why we hope to attract non-natives for the cannabis, so that we can still create another wing of that, tobacco, cannabis, so more people will be able to, put money into here. And it can benefit the community.
In June, the St. Regis Mohawk Tribal Council adopted an adult-use marijuana ordinance. It requires marijuana businesses to pay fees to support community programs and services for tribal citizens. Well, if you can't wait to stream the hit TV show Rutherford Falls, we know where you can see some episodes of the new season. The ATX TV Festival in Austin, Texas is hosting the season 2 screening of the show, and an in-person panel will include co-creator Sierra Teller Ornelas, as well as stars Jana Schmieding and Michael Greyeyes. Caitlin McFarland is the co-founder of the festival. She spoke to ICT about what she finds fascinating about the comedy.
It really is, a lot of different types of Native American people. Terry is my favorite. And I love that he is kind of the bad guy, and yet you still sort of root for him. I think that their characters are so complicated and complex, which you also don't see in comedies very often.
Virtual and in-person passes are available for purchase on the festival website. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, we learn the details of a class action lawsuit in South Dakota and more on a new enterprise for Oklahoma tribal nations. Stay with us. Native performing arts like music, theater, dance, and storytelling are glaringly underfunded. A new report by First Peoples Fund and the NORC at the University of Chicago aims to combat that. The 100-page report is called Brightening the Spotlight. Researchers interviewed Native creators who engage in performing arts to ask them why and how they engage in their practices. One of those researchers is Clementine Bordeaux, who joins us now to share more. Hi, Clementine.
Hi, good to be here.
So this report aims to answer 3 main questions. Tell us about those questions.
Yeah, so the report was to highlight the funding and presenting opportunities that do not meet many American Indian creators across the United States, and to really look at the way these creatives are in relationship with their creative practices, and how we as researchers can support a better communication across those funding and philanthropy spaces with artists.
Before we go any further, I'm noticing that you're saying Native creators or creatives. I know that terminology is really important, so tell us why you're saying that in particular.
Yeah, so as we found in the research and the data, a lot of Native creatives get stuck with the words that funders or philanthropy spaces will have, like artists, and a lot of these creatives don't necessarily self-identify as an artist. They may self-identify as storyteller. And so it becomes really complicated when they're filling out a grant application that says these specific things about an art practice, but they might understand themselves differently.
So I guess just so I'm understanding this correctly, let's say hypothetically there was a Native person who wanted to apply for a grant, like you just said, and said, I don't particularly see myself as an artist, but I do create, pieces of art. And it kind of, I guess, limits them from applying for these opportunities. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, for sure. So, they'll see this narrative or this rhetoric in a grant application, and they're like, well, I don't see myself as a theater artist, for example. I see myself as a storyteller, but nowhere in the application it says things about storytelling. So then they'll just not apply, even though what they're doing is exactly what that grant funder might be expecting an artist to do.
So in this report, one of the big findings was some of the ways that these Native creatives engage in performance-based art. So tell us about that.
Yeah, what we see very often is that our artists had a direct connection with community, and that often was a priority. I think especially for rural artists, so those who might not be in a municipal center, they really wanted to engage with their community in a particular way. And sometimes those community engagements aren't necessarily reflected in funding applications, right? They want our artists to be getting big awards or be performing in big performance spaces. And if you think about an artist from a reservation, they may not necessarily be in those same spaces.
I'm really curious, Clementine. You're a researcher. You of course are finishing your doctorate. What surprised you the most about this research? Was there a particular finding that stood out to you?
I think the one that I was really excited about is this perceived binary between contemporary and traditional. In my own research, I try to stay away from those words because I think it historicizes Native people in a particular way. But it was really great to see that reflected in the artists and the creatives. They often did not see their work in a binary, right? So I think there's this expectation in the arts and culture world broadly in the United States that there is a binary, right? Either people are doing contemporary things or people are doing traditional things. But I think most of our researchers did not see that, our creatives did not see that the same way.
Has there ever been a report or a study like this before?
Not in the United States. There have been similar reports in Canada and Australia, but this is one of the first qualitative studies in the United States.
Moving forward, I'm wondering how this research will help, combat some of the issues that we're talking about today. What do you have in mind for that?
Yes, I think it's really going to help funding and granting and presenting organizations to really rethink how they work with Native people and Native creatives in the United States. And hopefully this will expand to other spaces in the arts world.
Well, Clementine, we only have a short time left, but I want to give you the opportunity for people listening to this interview. What is the one thing that you want them to know about this report brightening the spotlight?
I think really listen to our artists and our creatives. And I think First Peoples Fund is such an amazing organization. They have a big show coming up at the Kennedy Center on July 1st. And I think being able to support and engage with our artists in all of what they do.
Well, Clementine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In March, a hotel in Rapid City, South Dakota, tried to ban all Native Americans from its property. NDN Collective met with the community to come up with a plan to face this discrimination. Communications Director for the collective, Sarah Manning, joins us today to talk about this incident and the larger issue of discrimination in the state. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just jump right in. What is the sense of the community, the Native community specifically, following this incident?
Well, I think this incident, first and foremost, was an opportunity for Indigenous people in Rapid City and in the state to speak to something that we've all known very well, and that's that racism is really prevalent in this state, both in overt and covert ways. And so once the business owner, Connie Uri, made her statements publicly that she had this intent to ban all Native Americans from her place of business, I think it really just lit this fire, and it gave everyone this moment to express themselves, to express their frustrations and just anger and just this mixed emotion of what Indigenous people have endured in the state. And it really energized everybody. There were 2 different marches where Native people in Rapid City had this opportunity to support. And then, of course, a bunch of people participating online virtually just had this moment of solidarity and unity. And so although the moment itself is one that is really upsetting, I think the fact that Indigenous people came together to address it really was this opportunity for galvanizing this moment.
We've been reporting on this incident now for a few weeks, and one of the things that always stands out to me is the picture of, everybody gathering outside of the hotel, and there's a banner that says eviction notice. Tell us more about why that symbolism is so important in this situation.
Yeah, I think that was also a really beautiful and important moment. So that day, that was the second march in the city of Rapid City, and it was led by 5 different tribal chairpersons, presidents of tribal nations in the state, who signed on this notice of trespass. And the notice of trespass was citing the Fort Laramie Treaty. And they deliver in this march, they delivered this notice of trespass and posted it to the door. And then shortly after that happened, this banner was erected and placed over the large sign of the Grand Gateway Hotel. And it was not only citing this treaty, but moreover, Indigenous sovereignty and Indigenous right to be on that land as sovereign nations, sending a message to the owners of the Grand Gateway Hotel, to the business, to the city of Rapid City, that Indigenous people are going to say something. This is their land. This is the land of the Oceti Sakowin. And that eviction notice was really not just symbolic, but it was an action of tribal sovereignty from the grassroots to the tribal leadership of those tribal nations.
NDN Collective has filed a federal civil rights class action lawsuit. One, tell us what that means, and two, what do you think the outcomes will be from it?
Yeah, so Indian Collective filed this federal civil rights class action lawsuit because not only did the owner of the hotel, Connie Yuri, publicly threaten her intent to ban all Native Americans, it wasn't just a threat. She acted on this threat. She actually denied service on 2 different occasions to members of NDN Collective staff, to Sunny Red Bear, and we have a recording of that, evidence of that, and to a larger group of NDN Collective staff who are not only denied rooms, but kicked out. And what the hotel cited was this policy that they weren't able to produce a copy of. And this policy that they cited was that they don't rent out to local people because of, quote, they were trashing the place. But again, they could discriminately choose when to cite this policy that, again, they had no evidence of. And so again, this threat made by the hotel owner and then this action taken allowed for this federal civil rights class action lawsuit to be filed. We filed it as a class action because we're giving the opportunity for other Native people in the city of Rapid City to sign on to that as well. And so we're in this process of engaging the community to submit their own reports of discrimination at that hotel. So that's where it's at now. In addition, we also filed for an injunction so that the business has to stop operating while the lawsuit is underway. And so we're waiting to hear back from the judge on that injunction right now. So it's still in motion. Things are still moving along. And in the meantime, we're working on also organizing the community around a boycotting all of the businesses of the Uri family, because this isn't the only one. They also own another hotel just nearby. And so a lot of people are really thinking of the Grand Gateway Hotel, but there's also many more businesses that the family owns. And so lawsuit underway, waiting to hear more. But in the meantime, a lot of local organizing going on the ground still too.
I know that a lot of times litigation and lawsuits, they're all really muddy, but give our viewers a sense of how long you think this process could last.
You know, it's really difficult to say, especially in the time of COVID, I think. I mean, ideally, we would have some swift action here. But in this particular process, we can hope to hear anything back in a number of weeks, and it could be even longer than that. And so it really depends on a number of different factors. But we're just here waiting. Things could happen and evolve day by day, too. And so we just got to be prepared and ready for the next action.
Well, we'll continue to cover this, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Leah.
We continue our special report at the Crossroads. This reporting brings together the Institute for Nonprofit News and 8 other news partners, all in an effort to answer the question, what is the state of the economy in Indian country? In Oklahoma, meat processing plants are turning out to be a key driver of economic growth. Managing editor of Muskogee Media, Liz Gray, breaks down her story as part of this report. Hi, Liz. Welcome to the ICT Newscast.
Ms. Jay, I'm excited to be here.
So lay the land for us. Tell us about the Muskogee Creek Nation's meat processing plants.
Yeah, so the Muskogee Creek Nation meat processing plant is a result of CARES Act money funding. They have had agribusiness growth over the years. They've been promoting that, and this was just kind of a natural progression for them to build this facility and provide food sovereignty and food security for the people living in this area.
And how much of a driver has this meat processing plant been for the nation? I understand that casinos are a big economic driver, but sort of put that into perspective for us.
I think that it's not going to be ever as big as the casinos are right now. I think that it's just more of like a supplemental economic development and creating opportunity for economic development for the nation, and also providing for their people in the same tone of, taking care. It's not always about, money for them. Sometimes it's about people.
I understand that you and the reporter that you worked on with this story actually got the chance to go to this meat processing facility. Tell us what you observed and sort of what happens there.
Yeah, so we were able to get a tour from Trent Cassie, who is the manager for the natural resources and agriculture at the Muskogee Nation. He took us through the facility. This was something that is USDA approved. He showed us where they basically from start to finish, of bringing in the cattle or other animals and what rooms went where, how it's all spaced out. They talk about their packaging. They have a retail store that is attached to it. So people are, welcome to come in and buy their dinners that they're going to be providing for their families. And there's also a test kitchen. One of the features that they have in there, the test kitchen, is available for citizens to come in to try new recipes, to even sell products in their retail facility.
So at this facility, they're also growing and raising cows. Is that right?
Correct.
Tell us more about the process. That was really interesting in your story when you were talking about how you actually have to feed this cattle so that it produces better meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the farming has been around, for decades. And it wasn't until 2017 when the tribe really started to focus on their agribusiness and agriculture. So within these few years, they've been able to kind of focus in on genetics and taking care of their cattle. And recently, whenever they had the meat processing plant was about 2 months away from the ribbon cutting, they made one of the largest known land acquisitions for the tribe to put the herd onto this farm, to create Loop Square Ranch. So we went out there, watched them feed their cattle. They said that a lot of the land supplemented that nutritional needs that the cattle need to be able to grow and to have really good, it's like partially genetics and partially the land that they're feeding off of.
I'm wondering historically, what is the history of tribal ranching for the Muskogee Creek Nation?
The history runs deep. It goes all the way back from whenever the people ended up here after forced removal from the southeastern area of the United States. It really took off kind of within prior to the Civil War. So about the 1830s it has been present. And it has went up and down. And I think that has a lot to do with the Civil War's president kind of destroyed this area for tribal nations, and they had to rebuild in that time. And then you had allotment, which, spread out land. So that made it difficult. And so it has just been more recently that tribal nations, especially within this area, have had the financial opportunity to invest into agriculture.
I'm really curious. I'm wondering how the tribal nation is planning to use agriculture to sort of create career moves for Native youth.
Yeah, that's something that it feels like they're really wanting to invest in future as far as agriculture for the youth and creating opportunities like USDA level jobs. And they want them to be able to feel like they can stay home and stay within the reservation and be successful in agriculture. So they have a youth program, a youth ag program that has livestock shows. They have about 300 participants in that, and that has grown. I mean, since 2017, they had 50, and so it's grown, quite a bit. And now they're putting more effort into appropriating building a youth educational center for agriculture and greenhouses, and just connecting our youth to the earth.
Well, Liz, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.